Welcome to the Artist Academy podcast, a place where we focus on the business side of art to help you attract more customers, increase profits, and ultimately live a life of creativity and financial freedom. I'm your host, Andrea Earhart, and this week's episode is an interview with artist John Foster, all about his lifelong career in custom lettering, pinstriping, and graphic design. I love chatting with artists who have lived through the decades of the evolving art industry because they have a completely different viewpoint compared to those who are just now diving in. Like, he was talking about stories and things that he was experiencing before I was even born. The evolution that needs to happen in order to survive this industry takes an open mind, constant learning, and someone who can just roll with it. And John is so that. There's so many differences when comparing today's art world and that of 20 plus years ago. And John has lived through it all and has flourished. And I think you're going to really enjoy this chat about how we start. And he explains how he started as an employee, like most of us do. And eventually he made the transition to being his own boss and everything that came with that, with pricing and valuing his work. And then he even moved multiple states and even to Europe as a freelance artist. But let me know what you think about this week's interview with John Foster. All right, John, tell us about your many years in painting all the things that you paint.
Well, thank you, first of all, for letting me be on here. It was a great time we had in Alabama up on the roof.
Yeah.
And that was a crazy time.
That was wild. Yeah. I'm glad to be talking to you now, not on a roof.
Right? Well, first of all, I'm very excited to be part of this. I have been looking at your Artist Academy. I even joined a couple of days ago, and I'm really looking forward to getting everything out of that can be gotten. I am a 40-year veteran commercial artist. It's been a fantastic career. I have like zero bad things to say about it. I've always enjoyed being able to make a living as an artist. I'm kind of a lifelong artist. When my mom passed away, she still had, my first grade safety poster contest stuff tucked away in the closet. And, it was fairly evident from early on that God had given me a gift, a talent. And so mom and dad were always really working to inspire that, to nurture that. And, one of my first memories about being an artist as a business venture, I grew up around race cars, and my dad was a truck driver. And so he always had race cars and hot rods around the house. And it was my birthday or Christmas or something. I was about 10 years old, maybe 11. And I'd been given one of those whole kits. It's got canvases and it's got oils and brushes and the whole thing. And I was in the basement, and I was working really hard to try to make this landscape happen. And I was probably crying, quite honestly. Always been a very sensitive guy. And my dad came past here and he said, "What's going on?" And I said, "I can't make this brush do what I see in my mind." And I'll never forget it. I was 11 years old, and he pulled that piece of canvas. It was one of those pads, had multiple pads of canvas or heavy paper, whatever it was. He pulled that off. He grabbed the brush out of my hand and loaded it up. And right in the center of that page, he drew a big red number 5. Okay. He said, "If you can do that," he said, "you can paint on my race car." He said, "If you can do that, you can letter a dump truck and you can make money from being an artist." I will never forget that. 11 years old. So kind of fast forward all through high school, I had every art class that was available. But I really took to drafting. Now this is like 1980, 81. So everything's really, really hands-on. We had no computer, nothing. So I was drafting. I was doing a field called technical illustration. And although they're all generated on the computer these days, they were all hand done back then. Okay, you'd buy a whatever, and it might have an exploded drawing of your lawnmower. Those were all drawn by hand by somebody. And I really was excelling in that. And my drafting instructor, I grew up in Wichita, Kansas, which is a heavy aircraft manufacturing town. We had Boeing, we had Cessna, Beechcraft, Learjet, a couple others. At one point in time, I think they said like a full third of the population of Wichita worked in aviation. And so my drafting instructor, I was 18, I was getting ready to graduate. He said, I think I can place you out at Cessna doing technical illustration. No college needed, just go straight to work. And that worked great for me because I really didn't like school very much. I didn't do well in school except in art and drafting and music. So we graduated. He said, go out and find yourself a summer job. And I think I can get you on at Cessna in the fall. Well, aircraft is a very cyclical, kind of up and down industry. They hire and hire and hire, and they lay off and lay off and lay off. And it was a layoff year. But my summer job that I got was for a one-man sign shop. I had to go in there 2 or 3 times to convince him to let me keep hanging around. And I helped him with installations and swept the shop and did, just a very basic entry level jobs for the sign industry. Again, this is 1984. So everything out there, unless it was illuminated, is a hand painted sign. Well, 6 months went by and he kind of got the idea that I wasn't going to leave. So he started training me in the craft of lettering by hand. It was a fantastic time. I really loved it. Do you know what a pounce pattern is?
Yeah, I've used it just a few times though.
Yeah, we had dozens and dozens and dozens. He would say, go over and pick out a pounce pattern and put it on he had a metal panel. It was enamel metal, and you could paint it up and then come in the next morning and razor blade it all off. So I got a lot of practice on that white panel. We're using one-shot enamel, lettering enamel. So once it dried, it would come off pretty easy. I started practicing. We were doing a lot of 1 foot by 8 foot signs that said wide load. And that was the only words on them. They would be painted safety yellow with black lettering on them. And I got to the point where with a pounce pattern, I could do wide load, block letters, square corners, and it was fun. It was a lot of fun. We got to touch a lot of stuff. I worked for him for about 2 years. And then he said, I'm kind of done having an employee. Why don't you go out on your own, be self-employed, and we'll split every other brand new customer that walks in the door can be yours. And, the one thing that he never trained me not one bit on was business. And, I was 19 years old, 20 years old. I'm living at home. If I made $150 a week, it was a great week, but I never knew anything about anything business wise. It's so funny. Even silly things like setting back for taxes. Okay. Self-employed individual, you made $150 a week. You spent $150 a week. And, tax time would come around and we would just scramble to make up for the entire year's worth of tax load. It was ridiculous. It was a fun time, but he was not great. He was non-existent for training in business. So our relationship actually didn't end well. He was kind of a paranoid fella anyway, and he just was convinced that I was stealing from him, and we parted company on pretty bad terms, actually. So,
dang it.
Yeah, unfortunate, but that happens, and you just got to pick yourself up and go on. And so, anyway, for the first 13 years of my adult life, I was mostly self-employed sign painter. And, for 13 years, I had paint from the tips of my finger to my elbows every day of the year. It was crazy times, but we learned a lot. I got married and had 2 beautiful children, and somehow was able to make it all along the way. Some of those early years, my very first experiences with corporate level jobs, I worked for Cessna. And this is a very interesting story with regard to the value that you place on your own artwork. And like I said, I was still young, probably 22, 23 at the time. And this would have been 1990, 91. Cessna aircraft. I got a call from a guy I went to church with, and he worked in the paint shop. And he said, we got this flag that we cannot replicate. And would you take a look at it and see if there's anything you can do with it? And so went out and met with the lead of that shop, and he showed me the artwork. And it was just red, white, and blue flag, but it was furled in such a way, and the shadowing was really nice. across the furrows. And I had read in a trade magazine about 3 weeks prior how to do that type of effect with an airbrush. Now, they'd been masking off the red stripe and painting gray on the white, and then masking that off and painting burgundy over the red, and it just didn't really mesh. And the deal was 2 ounces of clear with a little bit, 10% of black in there, and you just go across everything. And the red gets darker, and the white gets darker, and the blue gets darker. It was a really, really beautiful job. And the beautiful part about it for me was that I was on site about 2 hours. And I thought, man, I'm going to bill them $250 for 2 hours worth of work. And this was just huge money to me. And I ended up doing 3 of those. But walking out the door on the third one, the lead man, he pulled me by the shoulder and he said, "You're going to have to start charging more, because you're not going to get any more work unless you charge about $800 for this work." And that's the value that they had placed on the ability to come out and replicate that flag. So the next month they had another one ready, and I dropped them a bill for $800 for the same 2 hours worth of work. And they said, "Great job, John. We love it. We'll have another one ready to go in a month." And, you know, the value that your customer puts on the job is sometimes more than you put on the job. And it was a good learning moment.
I love that. Just keep talking. You're doing amazing. Like, I love to listen to, I love to interview guys like you that you've been in it like your whole working life. And so you have so much to say, and you're a very good storyteller. So I'm loving this. But yeah, it's like, I would have too back in the day, or even now, I struggle with like, but it's only 2 hours of work, but $800, like that just, it's tough. It's like, you almost feel like you're cheating them,
Yeah.
but you're not. But
It's an interesting thing that art is a very subjective thing. And I've told this story a couple times to some of my friends when they, how do you price what you, I said, okay, this guy walks into his friend's house, very, $2 million house, and there's a Taco Bell cup sitting on the mantle. And he says, "What's the deal with that?" He says, oh, that's art. Okay, I bought that down at ABC Gallery last week for $10,000. Can you believe it? And the guy says, "Wow, I wonder if they have another one that I could buy." And it's just the art value is really. My dad used to say something is worth only what somebody's willing to pay for it, but the value placed on it by the customer, or the value that the customer is led to believe, led to understand that is worth, that's the value of the thing.
yeah, definitely.
So many years, we did 13 years, like I said, in Wichita, Kansas. And then I changed directions slightly. We moved to Tulsa, Oklahoma, and I started working for an organization, straight graphic design. Now, I've always done paint, always done, had my hands in a paintbrush of some type, but did straight graphic design for 3 years, and then had an opportunity. Oh, this is one of the things in my notes I wanted to bring up. We struggled a lot in those early years, that we were trading the flexibility to be able to do things that we wanted to do as a family that we wouldn't have been able to as a full-time employee for Cessna. I didn't always make a whole lot of money. In fact, a lot of times I didn't make much money, but we were able to take advantage of things that I wouldn't have been able to do as a full-time employee. And after our time in Tulsa, we got the opportunity to move to Estonia in Northern Europe. And we took advantage of that opportunity. And we lived in Europe for 3 years. And our kids were 9 and 12. And what a fantastic opportunity for them. And I wasn't doing full-time artwork at that time, but I did a lot of artwork at that time. We were working with a nonprofit organization, humanitarian thing in Estonia. And I was doing pretty much graphic design, a little bit of marketing, and a whole lot of just right-hand man stuff for the director of that gig. And that's one of the coolest things about being your own boss. Whether you're in art or any other field, you have opportunities that not everybody gets to take advantage of.
What is in Estonia? Well, I'm trying to imagine, like, is it similar to Missouri? What is it like?
Well, first of all, Estonia is 6 hours off the Arctic Circle. So it's way, way north. The only thing north of there is Finland. So it's cold a lot of the time. They have the interesting phenomena being that far high latitudes that the summer days are 20 hours long, but the winter nights are also 20 hours long.
How did you like that?
It took some getting used to. We arrived in October. So we were just coming into that long, the sun would rise at 9 in the morning. It'd get about that far off the horizon. And then at 4 o'clock in the afternoon, it'd be dark again. So it took some getting used to. At the same time, no, the capital of Estonia is nothing like anything I've ever experienced in the States. It's a very old city, established like 1200s. They have buildings every day that they use that were built in the 14 and 1500s. So for an artist, man, it was really, really cool to be in that picturesque area. There was a lot of street artists, and I got to know a couple of them. It was a great time, really cool.
Awesome. And then you eventually moved to Florida, right? Or is there something in between there?
There is a little bit. That was 2003. We came back to Wichita. I had to get my kids through high school and finished up as adults on their own. And my mom was needing some close attention at that time. But again, I picked up the brush as a self-employed person, worked for a church for a little while as a straight graphic artist, dabbled in video. So we've been in Florida 8 years now. My wife's parents are elderly. My mother-in-law passed away 2 years ago. Well, we moved down here 8 years ago to be close to them. And being self-employed was the only option because of the flexibility required to take care of my parents-in-law. So brand new in the area, nobody knew me. And one of the things I've been seeing about your podcast, I love the fact that you need to get to know somebody in your area doing exactly what you want to do. And I reached out to a couple of artists and told them what I did and pinstripers. And I have a great relationship with 3 other artists right here in the region. And it really helped. Now, the other thing that really helped is finding a client that loves your work. And that is kind of what opened up the door to so much more work here I'm in Cocoa Beach area, Florida.
Who was your client and how did they open up more for you?
Right. So my primary field of expertise at this moment is hand lettering and pinstriping. I do a whole bunch of Harley Davidson motorcycles, just nice script on the tank and some pinstriping on the fenders, and they're fairly quick jobs. I have almost 0 jobs that take me more than one day. So this gentleman, he's actually a young guy. I don't think he's 30 yet, but he's been buying and selling old trucks. And he fell in love with pinstriping. And so we've been pinstriping hot rods, and he's a very specialized used car guy. And so almost everything that he buys, he wants me to come up and touch in some way. And sometimes it's just adding one little detail or one little point of pinstripe on the hood or on the tailgate. And then a lot of times now he's really been enjoying buying old trucks that have old paint. It's called a patina. You familiar with that term?
Kind of.
So he says, can you letter on this truck lettering that looks like it's been on there for 30 years or 40 years? And so we've been, whether it's we had a NASA logo that we put on a 1964 Ford that looked like it had been on there since the 60s, and it turned out really cool, and just a lot of stuff like that. So my work here in Florida has been a lot of just one day hand lettering, pinstriping. And because this guy's on social media, he generates a lot of work for me that is not his work.
Yeah, great. How did you meet him?
Straight up friend of a friend. I was lettering at a Harley Davidson dealer down in Melbourne, about 40 minutes south of here. And they told him what I was doing because he'd been asking. He'd been looking. The hand lettering and pinstriping is not mainstream. So it's kind of a specialized thing. It's a real specialized thing. And the guys that know what it is, they're looking for guys like me that still do it. And it will probably be a forever thing as long as hot rods and motorcycles, are around. So me rounding out 40 years now, the market is ripe for young folks to come in here and learn the craft because there's always going to be people that want it.
So pinstriping specifically, or just hand lettering, or?
Both together. They fold together real well. The brush discipline, I suppose, is a good way to put it, is really similar in both. If you want Harley Davidson written on the side of your bike, it's just not a very far upsell to say, would you like some pinstriping on the tank or on the fenders or on the bags? So they work really well together.
Very cool. I remember you showed me one of your videos for pinstriping, or one of the photos, and that's so cool. That's something I've never tried. So just the tiny letter and just the brush and the whole thing, like that just looks so neat. What kind of brushes did you say you used again?
The brushes are, and it's funny, they have just come out. Mac Company is who I use for pinstriping brushes almost exclusively. For a long time, my lettering brushes were Luco, Leo Ufolder out of France. They're a blue-handled brown squirrel hair brush, and they're all hair. They're all handmade, and they're all, the difference between a quill and a flat?
No.
So a quill is a round brush, and all the hairs come together to form one point, as opposed to a flat being a flat, like a chisel. And back when I started in 1984, Luco brushes, that was kind of the around where I was, that was the industry standard, and everybody was using them. Mac Brush Company, they've been building pinstriping brushes and all sorts of brushes for a long time. And they have a couple of series that I can't remember the name of, except for this latest one, because it's the first synthetic brush that I've ever touched that really impressed me. I was telling my friend, I keep trying to find a reason not to like these brushes, but they were developed by a sign painter up in the Indiana area, and Todd Hansen. I really, really appreciate his work. He's a very fine artist for lettering and pinstriping. And he worked with Mac to develop this synthetic brush. They work great. And they're like $17. My Lucos are past $45 now for an authentic, squirrel hair brush. And they're fine. They're beautiful work. We use an enamel paint. It's a heavy solids, heavy pigment enamel paint. And with the right brush and you get it to the right consistency, it just flows out like butter. My favorite compliment. I used to hate it so much, but you get somebody that's 25, 28 years old, has no idea what hand lettering is. My favorite compliment now is that looks just like a sticker.
Oh,
because they don't know any difference.
Yeah, it's shiny and it's pretty, and yeah,
a sharp edge. Mm-hmm. Yeah,
very cool. I have not dabbled in much enamel at all, but do you use one shot, or is there a different kind of paint that you use for pinstriping?
I use one shot primarily. There's a couple of different companies. Ronin is one. They do enamel as well. Alpha Enamel is out there as well. And then there's a whole different field of urethanes, which are an automotive grade paint that is built specifically for striping. And I've not dabbled in urethanes at all.
Have you ever been asked to paint a car, like to paint like somebody's logo on the car, or like paint a good amount of it, like say like leaves or something?
Probably. Let me think.
I was like, my question for it is, what kind of paint would you use? Would you use one shot to do that on a car?
Yes, most likely. And I say that with tears in my eyes. The regulatory standards have stripped away so much of, back when I started, everything had lead in it. And there's no lead-based paints out there anymore. And they keep trying to get additives that add longevity to it, but it's difficult. Just because I know one shot, there's certain recommendations for it. Keep this thing cleaned, keep this thing waxed, because even the best enamel paints are going to oxidize and get chalky even after a couple of years in the sunshine. There are a couple of companies that make UV-based clear that you can put over that. but I really don't have a whole lot of experience with that.
Okay, good to know. Tell us more about any stories that you have of any crazy event. I just on a job with you that was kind of crazy. So I know
Yeah.
you've got several.
Oh, there's, you get asked the craziest things, and it's either just yes or no, or I'll try it. We did a bunch of billboards back in the 90s. These are just like 10 foot by 30 foot or 32-foot billboards. And all we knew was to go out there and lay them out on site and paint them. Of course, a metal billboard in the west side of Kansas gets about 1,000,000 degrees in the afternoon. So we'd paint early in the morning. Fell off a couple of scaffolds a couple of times. I can tell you, that lacquer thinner tastes kind of like vodka.
Just wanted to try it.
Just wanted to try that. No, I fell. I had a scaffold break. Fortunately, I was only about 4 feet off the ground, and we bounced, and everything went everywhere, including paint and paint thinner on your face and your mouth, and it's crazy.
Oh my gosh, man. So the scaffolding just broke?
It did. We were a little bit overreached on how far the scaffolding was good. You know what ladder jacks are? Extension ladder. You put it up, and it's a platform that fits in the rungs, and then you put your plank across two ladders. So we were maxed out on how far we could go, and then the board broke.
Oh, I got you. Okay. Dang it.
So I had a job at Cessna. After the airplanes, they called me back, and they were just starting up a new line that they were putting into production, and they asked if I could replicate a piece of art that one of their designers had developed, 20 feet tall and 120 feet long. And that was one of the biggest things I had done to that point in time. And that job, along with another job, I use a transparency projector a lot still, although I'm really watching you using your goggles, and that's pretty interesting. But we would project that on the wall, and the scope of this job was so big. Fortunately, we could make it pretty dark in the room that they wanted to be in, but and then the rest of it, once you have the artwork projected on the wall, it's just a matter of going with the scissor lift up and down it and marking it out. That was a fun project. I remember one other big project, again with the transparency projector. We're out at 10 o'clock at night. The winds had calmed all the way down, and it was the gable end of a big building. So I get two pieces of artwork, one for the left side and one for the right. And we started on the left side, got it all adjusted, got up there with the scissor lift and marked it all down. And now it's time to go back to the projector, climb the ladder. Maybe we had another scissor lift. And the customer is sitting right there with me. And just one of those cool things that happens, dropped the transparency on, and it exactly lined up. And he said, "Holy cow." Just silly little things. But customers can be impressed by the smallest things.
Kind of. I mean, that's good positioning right up front.
It just worked out just the way. I mean, the scale, part of projecting on a wall is getting your scale right. We projected on a roof that we couldn't reach any other way, but I'd taken a bunch of pictures of the roof from where I thought our projection point was going to be. And then in Photoshop, trapezoided that artwork. When I put the artwork on the transparency, it was skewed way out of shape. But when I dropped it on there, it fit square on the roof of the thing we're going to paint. That was kind of you just try to figure out little things to make your work easier.
Have you figured anything out for like projecting on a rounded surface? I guess Pounce would be the best way to do it.
Yeah, you're just never going to get away from keystoning. You could do it in a bunch of narrow little portions, but that would suck. Paper pattern is going to be about the only way to do that, I think.
Yeah. Okay, cool. Anything ever like any big like lessons learned where you were like, "Ah, man, like you maybe learned a lesson, but you're better for it now," something? Mostly I'm wanting our young artists to learn from you and what not to do so they don't make those decisions.
Right. I actually wrote down a couple of notes about that. I didn't have any formal education in business at all when I went into business for myself. I had no logical right at all being self-employed when I went into it. So even just the most basic understanding of accounting, about the need for licensing and insurance, and putting away a little bit for the future, for retirement. I didn't know any of that. And so I came to the party a little bit late on all of that type of stuff. Communication in ways that are verifiable. You might talk to a client face to face or even on the phone, and he says, yeah, we'll be ready to start, and this is the agreed price. I will follow that up with a text or an email, just to confirm this is what we'd said, this is when we're going to do it, this is the expected timeline, and this is the expected price. And that way, if something goes sideways, you have some verification with the client that this is the agreed upon parameters.
Very cool.
That's an important one. I've heard you talk about that already. So
yeah, for sure.
Networking, when I was getting started, it was dog eat dog. And you could not get another sign artist to tell you anything. What kind of brushes you're using.
Really?
Just go down to Kmart and find yourself something. And it was brutal. It really was. There was no community because we were all competing for the same pool of jobs. That's the only way I could figure it. But it was, go figure it out yourself. That's the way I did. I had to go apprentice for a sign company for 2 years before they'd show me anything. I heard stories like that.
Oh my gosh. See, guys, be thankful for the Artist Academy nowadays.
Right.
You said you joined it, and I'm like, not sure why, because you've been doing this a long time and you know what you're doing. So I'm like, I don't know what you're going to get from the Artist Academy.
Listen, the things that I don't know is exactly what I need to know. And I'm very much looking forward to the marketing aspect of
like Instagram and stuff.
Instagram and Facebook. Absolutely. Okay. So yeah, that's going to be fun. I'll be around for a minute.
Cool.
Figure out what you're good at and figure out what you're not good at or what you really don't like, and maximize your time on what you're good at and avoid what you're not good at. And being part of a community where the guy that he loves to do horses. So I pitch off everything that wants to, you want a horse that looks like a horse, I'm not your guy. But I know a guy that I can point you to. And so I don't struggle over trying to produce artwork that I really don't enjoy doing.
Yeah, definitely.
Maximize on what you're good at and avoid what you're not good at.
Yeah, I remember first trying lettering, and Derek was really showing me way more than I knew that was a part of that. And it was, because I went from painting realistic stuff sort of, and then doing lettering, and then to murals. And I felt like for so long I was just learning and banging my head against the wall of like, this is all so different and crazy. But now I kind of like doing both. I just get bored with one thing. And so I'm just kind of going around with it. But it's tough, man, to like learn all the stuff.
Another aspect that's very interesting along those lines is knowing the viewing distance of your audience. If your audience, your target visual is 50 feet away, you don't have to spend a whole lot of time in making those letters or whatever it is. There's a certain point where the eyeball and the brain takes over to fill in those gaps. I had one job in my career was a brick building with the really super thick mortar joints, the small bricks with the deep mortar joints. And I'm struggling over this logo because it looks terrible up here where I'm painting it. But from across the street, it looked amazing. So don't get fussy over your line strokes if they're not perfect, because you got to consider how far away they're going to be viewed from. Stuff like that. That's often, I have people help me from time to time, and we're up on a scaffold and, we're just busting it out. And he says, boy, this doesn't look very good. I said, well, you're looking at it from the wrong position.
Yeah, like us painting on the roof. I was like
us painting on the roof. Yeah.
That was the worst logo I've ever painted, but down from below looks pretty great.
1,000 feet at 60 miles an hour, it looks really good.
Yeah. Awesome. I guess as we wrap up, what's the one piece of advice that you would give to artists who are wanting to do what you do, but are just at that starting point?
My greatest piece of advice is to push through the suck zone, because you're learning something new and you're going to suck at it. And that brush is extremely intimidating, and it trains you as much as anything else. Don't quit. Just stay with it until you figure out how to make it. It took me almost 4 years of pinstriping once or twice a month before I had a sellable product. But, I would hate what I did and throw the brush back in the box. But, 6 months or a couple of months would come around. Push through the time where you're not going to be any good at it. And eventually you'll get good at it.
Yeah, actually, pinstriping is the one that it looks very unforgiving because you make a line, you're with enamel paint. Can you just say I mess up? Can you just wipe that away?
On a new car or new bike,
Yeah,
has a good paint job, yeah, you can take all of it off. You can
okay.
take part of it off and fix it that way. But
Okay.
yeah. And then, some of these older vehicles that have a patina surface about as forgiving as a sheet of sandpaper, you get one shot at that. You get one go. And if it's not right, you got to figure out how to make it look right.
You just figure it out.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, thanks so much, John, for spending some time with us and telling us stories. And I really appreciate you just taking the time. And I'm so excited that I finally get to meet you because I had heard your name so many times just through the artist grapevine. And you're a joy to work with and you're such a cool person. So I feel honored that you came on.
It's been a lot of fun, and I'll be around for a little bit.
Okay, sounds good.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening to another episode of the Artist Academy podcast. If you like this art and business talk in audio form, then I want to invite you to get my book. It's called Mural Money, How to Grow Your Art Business from 0 to 6 figures. So starting from the very bottom, you don't even have a website yet. You have nothing. You're not sure where to go and you want to make money with a paintbrush. You want to have your creativity pay the bills. I have taken so much of the advice that I've gotten from artists from this podcast. I've been doing one episode for over 5 years now. So many interviews, so many good bits of advice. So I've taken the best of that advice and put it in my book, along with so many stories and lessons learned that I've had in my own mural career of just how I would go back and save a whole lot of time if I just knew these steps. It's a 15-hour audiobook. And so if you like this podcast, if you're listening to interview after interview, I know that you're going to like the book. So go to muralmoney.com. It's for anybody who wants to grow their art business with a paintbrush. Muralmoney.com. And I will see you next week for another episode of the Artist Academy podcast.